It's been 8 years since the fall of Hosni Mubarak and the uprising that briefly liberated Egyptians and their media from life under one-man rule. Fast forward to the present day, and President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's government is doubling down, tripling down on controlling the news media, measures that rights groups say are unprecedented in the country's recent history. Hundreds of websites blocked, more than 30 journalists imprisoned. New laws allow for the monitoring, censoring, and jailing of journalists and citizens, as well as targeting online outlets where they are most vulnerable, their bottom lines. The media rights group Reporters Without Borders warns that Egypt's few remaining independent media face probable extinction or exile. With the margins of acceptable speech narrower than ever, and journalists expected to demonstrate complete loyalty to the state, discerning truth in Egypt from propaganda gets more difficult by the day. Our starting point this week is the heartland of the revolutions that came to be known as the Arab Spring, Cairo.
Abdel Fattah el-Sisi did not wait to get into the president's office before taking issue with the Egyptian news media. This video, leaked to a website called Rast, whose logo remains front and center, was recorded in 2013. Sisi was the head of the armed forces, appointed by President Mohammed Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood leader he would later depose and imprison. He was meeting with his officers, discussing how to deal with journalists, empowered by the role the media had played in the Arab Spring, the fall of Mubarak. Sisi is off camera when he responds to this officer, but you get the message.
A lot of what he was talking about in that video has become true. That was not self-fulfilling prophecy. That was planning to actually control media as much as possible.
احنا شغالين في ده اكيد بنحقق نتائج افضل لكن اللي احنا عايزينه لسه ما وصلناش.
For the first time ever in Egypt's history, those military rulers who are almost half gods and immune against any kind of accountability or media criticism found themselves being described in Egyptian media and social media as liars or deceivers or oppressors, and they definitely didn't like that.
What President Sisi said in that is that the revolution had begun to dismantle the shackles on the media, and we need to return to a moment where we control the media. So he says this is going to take a very large statewide effort, because once we control the media and return the cycle of fear in society, then we can have ultimate control.
When a government wants to transform a media landscape, the place to start is at the ownership level. ONTV is a channel that used to air lively political debates. Like many other outlets with new owners, it now toes the government line. In 2016, the State Intelligence Agency, the GIS, launched its own channel, DMC TV. Then, last year, the GIS was revealed to be behind an investment group called Eagle Capital that has bought 6 newspapers and websites, including the site Yom 7, as well as ONTV. It's like the CIA starting its own channel in the US while quietly buying CNN and Buzzfeed and hoping that no one would notice.
The ownership by the intelligence agencies changed the editorial line in some of these private companies by actually either making it completely entertainment and just like movies and sports and such, or advocating for a very pro-state, nationalistic, protective kind of discourse, security discourse, basically.
في حالة طوارئ واللي عايز يتكلم ضد الحالة ديت، اللي عايز يقف ويقول لك حقوق إنسان يتحرق هو والإرهابيين زي بعض.
You watch a channel or a website and you say, oh, which intelligence agency is behind that?
The Egyptian government, through its numerous security agencies, has established private companies buying and controlling various mass media establishments. Egyptians no longer trust their mass media, regardless of whether they're private or state-owned. You have officers who instruct journalists and news editors on what the next day's headline will be. All national and private newspapers are issued with practically an identical headline. It has become a laughingstock for many Egyptians.
The legal landscape is changing too. Late last year, Egypt's media regulator, the SMRC, proposed a new law that would allow the state to block broadcasts and websites for breaking rules that were so ambiguously worded that hundreds of journalists, politicians, and public figures petitioned for the abolition of a law that had yet to pass. Among the laws that have, a so-called cybersecurity law that, under the pretext of stopping fake news, restricts online journalism and encourages service providers to collect and share data on users. And there's a new registration law requiring online news sites to pay thousands of dollars just to apply for a license. If enforced, it could put many sites out of business and discourage others from ever starting up.
The last remaining space for free speech and for some professional journalism was the internet. And they are trying everything they can to curtail this remaining space. So they started with blocking these websites. We have seen terrifying law provisions such as lengthy prison sentences and fines, which means journalists working in these websites would have to observe so many precautions and red lines.
If cyberspace was the last vestige of political activity, then the state will regulate at that as well. Just as the intelligence apparatus has started to buy media outlets, they have now started infiltrating things like Facebook and Messenger and WhatsApp. And if, for example, you forward messages on WhatsApp to several individuals, what you get is this dissemination of false information charged under the terrorism law. And so this chilling of society and of activism has now entered this realm of cyberspace where people cannot even report on reality.
It's not as though the Sisi government needs laws to jail journalists. Al Jazeera's Mahmoud Hussein is one of dozens of reporters currently behind bars. Accused of disseminating false news to defame the state's reputation, he's been imprisoned for more than 2 years, solitary confinement, but has never been charged. That's against Egyptian law, and it's typical.
They use pre-trial imprisonment as a means of technically not having any political prisoners. A court case is set up, you get sent to prison based on that court case. That pre-trial detention lasts for years without a trial ever taking place. Some get released and some don't. It's all part of a grand illusion manufactured by the regime, that there are secret political currents working on toppling the regime and providing support for terrorists.
President Sisi has grown accustomed to the journalistic red lines he has laid down with the Egyptian media.
لا ترى في وجود رئيس قادم من المؤسسة العسكرية إنه معناه كده العسكر يحكم أو إنه الجيش بيدير الأمور.
أنا مش هسمح لك تقول العسكر تاني.
And foreign news organizations reporting from inside the country are also feeling the heat, as are Egyptians who speak to them. 10 months ago, this woman told the BBC her daughter had been forcibly disappeared. She's been jailed, accused of belonging to a terrorist group. A reporter for the Times of London was deported last year. Another journalist from France was denied entry. Cases that have not gone unnoticed by other correspondents based in Cairo.
They are trying different approaches, carrot and stick policies and strategies with foreign journalists. If you criticize the government, we wouldn't give you the license to work in the country or suddenly deport you.
And we've been asked to leave.
Foreign correspondents in Egypt, they all live in continuous state of intimidation and anxiety. They are not able to do the work freely.
The state is now creating new strategy to deal with the correspondents in Egypt, where if they get something wrong, it's like, okay, you got that wrong, New York Times correspondent, you got that wrong, and sometimes they push for credentials and such. So I think they are being more proactive in pushing for a certain narrative, a statist narrative about what's going on in Egypt.
Remember, the revolution broke the fear nexus. It broke the barrier. And people had no problem coming into squares and writing and blogging and tweeting and saying what was happening. President Sisi was very weary of this moment of how can we consolidate power in a way where we can return the institutions controlled under the state and remove the independence that media has had for 2 years. And that's exactly what we've seen.